Hello, I'm SHSMITH, and this is my lab practical on the skull and vertebral column. My husband is the cameraman, and he's going to scour the room to let you know that I'm not using any props. Now I will start the practical. This is lab practical 2, and it's on the skull and the vertebral column. The first bone that I'm going to point out is the frontal bone, and that is located here in front of the skull. The parietal bone is on either side of the skull on the side. Side here and on this side. The occipital bone is in the back of the skull in this area. The next bone is the temporal bone, which is on the side, and that's located in this area. The next group of sutures, the sutures that I'm going to point out, the first suture on the list is the coronal suture, and that goes across the skull this way. That's the coronal suture. The next suture is the sagittal suture, which goes down the middle of the skull. And this is the sagittal suture. The squamous suture is on the side, and it's right above the temporal bone on the side in this area. The squamous suture, really. The lambdoid suture is in the back, right over the occipital bone in this area. The next bone that I'm going to point out is the nasal bone, and that's right in front here. This is the nasal bone. The next bone is the maxilla. The maxilla is the bone located over the top teeth in this area. The next bone is the mandible. The mandible is the bone right under the bottom teeth, this area. The mental foramen is a little hole here located in the mandible, or on the mandible is a little hole. The zygomatic bone is this bone, located on the side of the skull here. The zygomatic bone. The zygomatic process is the arch next to the zygomatic bone. The next bone on the list is the sphenoid bone, which is in the eye socket, and it's located in this area. And you can see part of the sphenoid bone on the side of the skull as well. The ethmoid bone is next to the sphenoid bone in the eye socket, between going towards the nose in this area. The next bone on the list is the infraorbital foramen, and that's right under the eye socket, the hole right under the eye socket. Let me see if I can find it. It's located here. The infraorbital foramen. The external auditory meatus is in the area where the ear would be. It should be a little hole area right on the side. It's really not on this skeleton, but I'm going to say in this area. Right about where the ear would be, the external auditory meatus. The next bone on the list is the hyoid bone, which would be located right in this area in front of the neck. And that bone is attached to the skeleton by muscle and tendons, so it doesn't really articulate with any bones. It's just attached by muscle and tendons. The next bones on the list, we're going to turn the skeleton to the back. And the first bone region that I'm going to point out is the cervical bones. And that's the first 7 bones in the vertebrae. So if you count down 7 bones, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's C1 through 7, the cervical region of the vertebrae. The next region that I'm going to point out is the first 7 bones of the thorax region of the vertebrae. And that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to point out the first 7. And I'm going to count down the next 5 to bring me to the lumbar region of the vertebrae. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we've reached the lumbar region of the vertebrae, and there are 5 of those bones. And we're going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's the lumbar region of the vertebral column. The next bone that I'm going to point out, it goes down to a curved region of the vertebrae, and that's the sacrum. It's located right under the lumbar region of the vertebrae, the sacrum. That's this area. And at the very tip of the sacrum is the coccyx, and that's this little bone here at the end of the sacrum. This concludes my practical on the skull and the vertebral column. Thank you.